It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining the conversation as we kickstart a vitally important one. World Alzheimer's Day is marked on the 21st of September each year and is a day on which Alzheimer's organizations around the world concentrate their efforts on raising awareness about Alzheimer's and dementia, affecting a lot of people here in South Africa as well. With us this morning to discuss this topic is Willem Meiberg and Dr. Rain Strubel. If you have any questions or insights about Alzheimer's, please send us a voice note on 063-408-8863. You know this is a safe place and we value your opinion. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It really is a difficult one to broach because, and often on this show, we'll make light of situations like this as a means of us trying to grapple and understand because it's something that could affect so many of us. When we speak about dementia, maybe Doc, I can start with you. Where does Alzheimer's fit into that spectrum? Could you describe what is going on physically inside the brain and the body when Alzheimer's takes effect?
Right. So let's start with the fact that dementia is an umbrella term. So like the term cancer is an umbrella term, you get brain cancer, lung cancer. Same goes for dementia. Dementia is a syndrome and it's an umbrella term, and you get different types of dementia, of which Alzheimer's seems to be at this point the most common one.
Okay.
So we talk about atrophy of the brain. In the old days, people talked about verkalkte are, words like people go Kens. But to a large extent, this disease is still a mystery and can only actually be diagnosed on autopsy. So there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misconceptions. And for me, what is important is that if you have seen one person, or if you know one person living with dementia, you only know one person living with dementia. So yeah, it is a disease that affects, as you said, millions of people globally. And I think we are still mystified as to exactly what is going on.
How do we approach it then? What is the first sign possibly, and I would imagine there are a lot of people that are affected by this kind of scale of, that are really nervous about this. And I think because we know that it comes with age, well, that's at least my understanding of it, we kind of feel like no one is safe, that this could be possibly something that affects all of us at some point in our lives. What are the early warning signs? Are there any early warning signs?
Yeah, again, I think we have to be so careful because dementia is a diagnosis by exclusion, which means there are at least 100 things that we have to exclude.
Could be, yeah.
And because there's been such a hype about it, a lot of people think, oh, I forget where I put my car keys. I have Alzheimer's light, or, I forget names. We all do that. Forgetting is not necessarily a sign.
Part of the human condition.
I always say, a lot of people say, I walk into the kitchen, I don't know what I'm doing there. That's normal. When you walk into the kitchen and you know that you want to make yourself a cup of tea, and you don't know suddenly how to make the cup of tea, you can't put things together like the kettle and the teapot and the tea bag, But
this is something that you've been doing for
But,
20 years
Graham,
of your
this
life,
is so
yeah.
important. This could be a sign of an extended chronic depression. It could be the sign of, taking your medication wrong. It could be a sign of delirium, that could be induced by many different things. So before we go onto the bandwagon, which it has become, of dementia and Alzheimer's, there are a myriad of things that we have to
requires
exclude.
an exhaustive process.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
How do we go about that then? How do we go about assessing someone in this kind of journey to at least establishing what is going on?
I think it's building up a network of professionals that understand, what dementia is, and so that there is a diagnosis that's safe, for people, and that there's support afterwards. Because I think that's the stigma surrounding it. A lot of people avoid getting the diagnosis because they're afraid of the stigma, and I think that's why this is important to talk about it and break that stigma down and saying that it affects everyone differently.
That being said, then, when we move through these phases, once you've established that there is concern now that dementia we are likely sitting within that space, and we now need to focus on treatment. How do we go about that? What is the first step?
Okay, so something that is very important is that the diagnosis of dementia is not a death sentence, okay? And this is where Willem and I come in, that we have a different approach. We say that people can live well with dementia. Yes. What we now know about the brain is that there is neuroplasticity. The brain can continuously develop new neurological pathways. Even someone diagnosed with dementia can still learn new things, can still build brain reserves. And the more brain reserves you build, and you build brain reserves by learning new things, doing different things, whatever it is, just live, you know.
Stimulate, yeah.
I always say, you know, get off your backside, just live. Yeah. You will develop new neurological pathways that will make the impact of dementia far less.
Yes.
But sadly, we live in a world, and this is why, you know, it's so great that we're discussing this on Expresso, that it has to come out of the closet. It has to be destigmatized. People have to realize that, you know, it is not a death sentence. Yes. And I heard you earlier talking, and you know, excuse me for correcting you, but a lot of people talk about people suffering from dementia. People do not suffer from dementia. People suffer from the way that other people treat them.
Yeah.
They suffer from the way that they are excluded, for the way that they lose their personhood. Yes. They suffer from the fact that they're not seen as human anymore. No one takes them seriously. Whereas, you know, as I said, to diagnose dementia, you know, is such an intricate process, and can only be done on autopsy, really. It means that the rest of the brain is intact.
Yes.
It can still develop.
It means that you can live proactively. And Dora, you're not the first to correct me. Yeah? It's a little thing we call privilege. No, it often comes into the fold when, and I've said that before, where I've called because I didn't want to call someone disabled. You're differently abled, you suffer from. And I've been corrected on many occasions for saying that, but they're not suffering from it. That is their condition that they have to live with. And I think just like we might know very little about this condition in terms of those final stages, we also know very little about how amazing this brain is and the ability. I love the term elasticity. I don't know how elastic my brain is, but we're going to find out this morning. In fact, there are ways that you can be proactive and strengthen your brain and do something about it. Be proactive right now. They are young, okay, so their memory hopefully is still intact, but let's put the gents' memories to the test right now.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Willem Myburg, mentor at the Eden Alternative, and Dr. Reins Strubel are giving us this morning an insight into Alzheimer's disease, often called a family disease because of the chronic stress of watching a loved one slowly decline through the effects, and it does affect everybody in that space. Do you have any questions, any insights about Alzheimer's or dementia? Please send us a WhatsApp voice note on 063-408-8863. In fact, James, we've got a voice note from Lebo this morning. Let's hear from her.
Good morning, Expresso show. As a grade 12 learner, I know that Alzheimer is a genetic disorder. But when I investigate more, I found that it is caused by environmental and lifestyle factors. So I want to know, how does environmental and lifestyle factors related to Alzheimer? How do they cause Alzheimer? That's what I want to ask.
Levels coming from my job, I think. A very pertinent question. Knowing that it is very difficult to diagnose, that's one side of this equation, but we want to be proactive, and that very much seems to be the space that you're operating in. What can lead to it? Is it genetic? Are there environmental effects, prolonged stress on the brain? I don't know which of you wants to take this, maybe Doc. What are those causes that lead to this? How much is environmental, situational, and how much is genetic?
Sure. Again, all of the above. I think if you look at our current lifestyle, if you look at, you know, the food that we consume, the stress levels, you know, these are all contributing factors. So there's a very, very interesting study. It's called the NUN study, as in N-U-N, nuns, yeah, Professor Snowden. It's a longitudinal study that looked at the life course of a group of nuns. And they chose the nuns because, pardon the pun, they knew their habits. They knew exactly, they were a closed order, whatever, and things that came out are things like diet, exercise, socializing, intellectual stimulation, so education, that could help the brain stay healthy longer. Okay. However, we know that there are people who do all of the above and they still get dementia. So, there is no clear-cut answer. Of course, we want to reduce our risk, but there is a genetic disposition, and a lot of people are now going for DNA testing. So there is a genetic disposition. That does not mean that if you have the genetic disposition that you will get dementia.
That's a certainty.
It does, again, mean that, we have to be more proactive in terms of physical and brain health. And that goes for all of us. Yeah. Of course, excessive smoking, and I say excessive alcohol use, these things contribute to, breakdown in brain health. But I know of people who have lived perfectly healthy lives, doing everything that they can, highly educated people who get dementia. So no one knows.
And that's what keeps you in business. That's what
Absolutely.
keeps pushing that front line
And
forward.
of course, the fact that people are growing older and older.
Yeah.
When I started in this field 26 years ago, we were talking about the life expectancy having increased by 10 years. Now, 26 years later, the life expectancy has increased by 30 years. So, we're looking at people growing to 120.
And I have a feeling with our ability to process data that we've developed, certainly within the medical space over the last 3 years, to achieve what we have in this fight against COVID, that's only going to speed up, which is great.
Yes.
This doesn't just affect the person that is going through the condition, the family is massively affected. Why is this such a heavy hitter? Why are families and loved ones so badly affected in this space? And what can they expect when dealing with someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's in their family, in their close circle?
From a carer point of view, I think the challenge is because there's that fear of how the person might change, and the impact that it would have on their daily lives, and if you don't have the resources to have a person at home, stay in place, that's when the challenge becomes really difficult. Do you keep them at home or do you send them to a care home? So there's always, and it will always change. There's no rules on how to look after someone. It depends on that specific situation and the family, how they deal with it.
Every single person is different. Every family situation is different. The bottom line here, there is a network. There are some incredible minds working towards finding solutions, not just for the bigger picture, but for your situation right now. You can be proactive. We're going to get into how you can approach that and some treatment options in just a moment. But please keep those voice notes coming. 063-408-8863. We'd love to hear from you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to our Tuesday medical discussion here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show. And once again, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I think viewed as the most common cause of dementia, something that I'm beginning to understand covers a very broad spectrum. Alzheimer's is a physical disease which directly affects the brain. That's where it's simple. Beyond that, it becomes very complex. And we are trying to wrap up our conversation now around Alzheimer's disease ahead of World Alzheimer's Day tomorrow with Willem Myburg, mentor at the Eden Alternative, and Dr. Reins Strubel. And of course, it's your last chance to join in on this conversation. But please, any voice notes, 063-408-8863. In fact, we'll keep those voice notes running for the rest of the show. I suppose maybe we should get practical here, because I think we've opened up this net to understand that this is so broad and so individual at the same time, which makes your job very difficult. Where do we start then? How, maybe from our perspective, when is the right time to seek professional help?
That's a very interesting question. People who live with dementia live with the knowing that they have dementia for up to 5 years. And postpone. People rationalize. They become incredibly creative around finding ways to counteract the forgetting or the confusion.
To almost hide it, I'm sure.
Hide it
They-
very, very, very well.
It's
They,
because of the stigma that's attached to
Yeah.
it. So I think that's the first thing that we can do. We can start breaking down the stigma surrounding it. It doesn't. We say to change our minds about people's minds who have changed.
Yeah,
That's where we need to start. You know, so it's
love that.
it's not a death sentence.
completely.
yeah, and as Willem says, you know, it's the stigma that prevents people from seeking help. So rather start early. I mean, when you are worried, rather put that out of the equation than walk around and becoming more and more concerned. And then you know what it's like. You know, you wake up in the middle of the night and you are convinced that there's something wrong.
Wrong, yeah.
So reach out. You know, that's my plea to people is just reach out. You know, talk. Go to your GP. Go and find an expert to speak to. A GP is not the right person to diagnose, but it's a good point to start, to say, let's exclude, you know, the things that might present. We don't talk about the symptoms of dementia. In my opinion, there's no such thing.
Exactly.
But just early on, start having the conversation, reach out and speak to people and say, listen, I'm worried, who do I go to, where do I go, what do I need to do? The earlier, the better. I think to put your mind at ease is the most important thing.
Because otherwise that isolation starts from that point.
Exactly.
So you're isolated for, as you said, up to 5 years before you even connect and start getting answers. You seem to be working in a very proactive space on that front line. What are you guys doing, and what needs to happen in this space? How should we be thinking about dementia and about Alzheimer's to be proactive, to grow our brains, to move forward now? What are your hopes and dreams for this World Alzheimer's Day? What do we need to push towards, do you think?
Education, education, education. So,
Yes.
so we represent two different organizations. Willem Eden Alternative, that does a lot of education for frontline caregivers, and for institutions to deinstitutionalize. Because institutionalization is the worst thing that can happen to a person. So we have the Eden Alternative. Geratech, on the other hand, looks at also education, but from a more physical point of view. So the philosophical, the physical, education, education, education. Let's talk about it. You know, it is not something to be ashamed of. It is something that needs to come out of the closet, and people need to be educated, as complex as it is. Let's just, and this is why, you know, guys, this is fantastic that Expresso is talking about it.
Absolutely.
It's not something that should just be on medical channels.
For sure.
You know, let's talk about it, because we all are connected to someone who somewhere has a problem with memory or cognitive impairment. Let's get it right. Let's get it out in the open. Education.
It is out in the open right now, so let's keep this conversation going. To the both of you who have chosen to devote your life to working in this space, on behalf of the families and the individuals that you help, thank you so, so much. I have a feeling this is going to be a very impressive frontier to watch over the next decade. I think the medical fraternity, this tribe that has been brought together by the utter devastation, yes, of COVID, there is a knock-on effect here. We are more connected than we've ever been before. The strategic network is primed to take on challenges like this, but it requires you and I to join the conversation. So spread the word, start spreading that education, and of course, empower yourself by staying as healthy and as active as you can. Use every tool that you've got in your bag. In fact, let's do that right now.